بسم الله وسبحان الله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد كل حرف كتب ويكتب أبد الآبدين ودهر الداهرين وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم. صدق الله العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you are well and in the best of health and iman, inshallah. We'll resume from page 315. Apologies for the slight delay. Okay. Um, the chapter of nurturing the ties of kinship. وبالأسانيدكم متصلة من شيوخنا إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: باب في صلة الرحم, nurturing the ties of kinship. وبقال حدثنا موسى بن إسماعيل قال حدثنا حماد هو بن سلمة عن ثابت عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال: لما نزل لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. آل عمران. قال أبو طلحة: يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرى ربنا يسألنا من أموالنا فإني أشهدك أني قد جعلت أرضي بأريحاء له. فقال له رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: اجعلها في قرابتك. فقسمها بين حسان بن ثابت وأبي بن كعب. قال أبو داود: وبلغني عن الأنصاري محمد بن عبد الله قال أبو طلحة: زيد بن سهل بن الأسود بن حرام بن عمرو بن زيد مناة بن عدي بن عمرو بن مالك بن النجاري وحسان بن ثابت بن المنذر بن حرام يجتمعان إلى حرام وهو الأب الثالث. وأبي بن كعب بن قيس بن عتيك بن زيد بن معاوية بن عمرو بن مالك بن النجار. فعمر يجمع حسان وأبا طلحة وأبي. قال الأنصاري: بين أبي وأبي طلحة ستة آباء. SubhanAllah, you can see quite a long um, name there. SubhanAllah. So sometimes some people do have very long names, and it can be a real mouthful to actually say the name. So SubhanAllah. For whatever intention those names are kept, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make those names a means of blessings for them and for their parents. Ameen ya Rab. This is a beautiful point here. لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. So when we look from the perspective of biological needs, I was just discussing with a friend of mine, subhanallah, who I went to meet 8:30 last night, and we just went on from one discussion to one discussion. And generally, wherever I've gone, when they know someone of the deen who's a scholar, whoever may be learned, they have more and more interest to discuss. So we were discussing an array of topics, and then we discussed things like what was the Salafi input from that, what was the spiritual input from the Hanafi, Shafi, different things contextually, how certain things are seen conceptually, and how it's misunderstood, and so many different things. But one thing was that as long as you've got an open mind, you'll always understand something that much quicker and better. But if you have a tunnel vision, you'll never be you never develop a perception of flexibility and acceptability. Really, really, really important points here, especially in the discussion of the Islamic sciences. Your perception and your exception. Not the other exception, but what you accept, sorry, just to clarify. So your perception and what you accept, if we just remember it that way, inshallah, because what you develop in terms of thought, that will impact what you are able to bear. Because you might just think, for example, a certain group of Muslims, it's so and so, it's so and so. And as a result of that, it creates a mindset. And what we need from people today is what's really important is that they ensure they've got an open mind, because when you have discussion, when you have class-based understanding, then you develop ideas from there. The more exposure, the more you study with different teachers, the more you'll have the depth and breadth to accept, understand, have flexibility, and maybe on some points agree to disagree. With this ayah, when we talk about context of wealth, we always love things for ourselves. It's very, very rare that you find individuals that they don't love more for their self. They love more for others rather than themselves. So you get very few individuals like that. And it's a beautiful quality, but at the same time, you've got to put things in there. Um, I suppose the way to understand it would be is to um, put something in its place. And this is where we come across the term of dhulm. What is the definition? A dhulm, what was the Arabic definition, which is slipped my mind now, but something which is not in its place. الشيء في غير محله. Something which is not in its place is dhulm, is transgression, it's oppression. And that's what happens. The order is that wealth should be spread. There should be what we call circulation of wealth. But when we get people hoarding, when we get people not being justified proportionally with wealth, you get problems in societies. But where you get taxation, where you get a proper system, that helps government services, you won't have poor people, and so on and so forth. And you find these historically when you read up the history of the Abbasid dynasty, even the Umayyad dynasty. It was amazing what they came up with, from governmental policy and procedures to taxes, tax collectors, and subhanallah, our earlier Muslims, what they had established, the rule of Muslim Spain. I mean, if you just read upon that and what you've come across is amazing. So just going back to wealth, it's easy that we solidify our own interests, our own want, but then to have the same love for someone else, that's a test. So you might think, yes, I've got £1,000. Okay, I don't mind giving maybe 150 of that to someone else, but I've got to have 850. But if you flip that coin, it's a difficult one. I mean, obviously, sometimes there is situations that may not be possible. But you have to do something which draws equality, which shows, I suppose, your sincerity towards Allah, not the actual person itself, because Allah will judge that. Even though people may not understand your sincerity or misjudge it or think you're not sincere, but your Rabb knows, and that's the main thing. So your approach, your intention has to be likewise. So with this, when we say لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, that you will never ever attain piety, what it's actually saying is it's the essence and the ethics of piety, which is really important, because doing good, one would think it's easy. I've said, Assalamu alaikum, I've done good. But I was explaining my Friday sermon yesterday that it's not as easy as ABC. Allah puts the inclination, Allah puts the spiritual upliftment in your soul. He creates a form of encouragement. Then you take those steps. Then you come to the point of doing it or not doing it. But if you end up doing it because there was nothing deterring you or deterring your attention as such, you end up doing it, and then that thing becomes a hasana. But there's a whole process, just like a sin. Alladhi waswisu fi sudurin nas. Shaitan does the waswasa. He puts the honey on the wall. He's now creating the feeling. He's making sin look very easy. It's enticing. It's almost sugar coated. So it's so that much more easier to do. And then you come to the point where you've got to make that decision. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. If no, okay, Alhamdulillah. And then you'll engage into zikr, or like you'll just go into this mode of some sorts. But if you do it, then you do it, you get the whatever enjoyment out of it. But then afterwards it dawns upon you, oh Allahu Akbar, I have sinned, I've broken laws of Allah, laws of my Habib. Now I need to do tawbah, now I need to do this. So you can see the whole process is a very, very it's very sanctified, and it's very scientific, that it's got those processes. So where people say, yeah, I can do good, I can do bad, it's not as easy as that. When you discuss it, explore it, reflect on it, and understand, it's very, very different. So in the very same way, here, when it talks about lan tanalul bir, that you will definitely not gain that goodness. It talks about the ethics, which is really important, that you have to have that structure, and you have to have that spiritual inclination. Because if you don't have the inclination, which is what we call tawfiq, Ya Allah, give me the tawfiq, give me the strength to do an action. If you don't have the strength, the tawfiq, the spiritual inclination, where on earth will you do good deeds? So in the very same way, when we talk about loving something for ourselves as well as loving it for others, it's the same process. So if I'm advising someone, I would advise them in a way where perhaps I could remember, okay, yeah, my teacher or my elder advised me like that. So I could perhaps use those steps with this person who's asking me for advice. So you've taken the same process, same steps, but then there might be someone else who may not, unfortunately, be compatible with that advice. So you take a different thing. So this is very, very important. Sincerity, ethics, and a procedure in doing this. So this is very, very important. And for some people, it becomes such first nature that subhanAllah, for them, they do it. People praise them, people don't praise them. It's the same. Any madhamma and ta'rif, it's the same. They get praised, they don't get praised. For them, they want to do it for Allah. My Lord will give me the ajr. I'm doing it for your sake, Ya Allah. Rest is up to you. So varying level of the Iman thought process. So I hope that sort of uh, laid some level of uh, I would say a concept or an understanding. And this is where subjects like psychology or philosophy come in. And when we talk about the greats, like, and I know some people may not be very keen on some names, like you got Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, a great scholar. Some people are not keen because of certain views he holds or the way he does certain things. But what I say always, and I encourage students and participants that take the good from all scholars, anything that you think doesn't quite hit the lines of what you're looking, then you just discard it respectfully. And it's very easy, Imam Ghazali, Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti, these were thinkers. They were people who really brought revolutions because they understood and they revolutionized that form of thinking or explaining. So someone who's teaching fiqh, he might be super qualified, but their deliverance may not be in that way because they may not have had that training or they may not have had enough exposure to present one thing in several different ways. So this is why it's important. And I've said before as well that whether you're sharing or whether you're elaborating, the only way that you can get depth and breadth in your thought, in your actions, is by studying elsewhere as well with other shuyukh, with other different madhahib as well, and you get again appreciation. That's why you'll see that so far the lectures I've delivered, um, you would have found that there's an acceptance for the schools of thought. I'm not very what they would call zeroed in on just Hanafi and that is it. No, when everything else has been allowed, then there should be a flexibility. There should be a perception to develop the ideas of other schools of thought, even though their dalail and their proofs are that much stronger. Sorry, I better carry on with the reading, otherwise I'm going to go on and on. But it's just a few points there, inshallah, just to think about, inshallah. There's very loose points there as well, some which may not be directly related to the context here, but the one thing leads on to another. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast and develop a steady perception, flexibility, and the ability to accept what others say. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبقال حدثنا حناد بن سري عن عبدة عن محمد بن إسحاق عن بكير بن عبد الله بن الأشج عن سليمان بن يسار عن ميمونة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كان لي جارية فأعتقتها فدخل علي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأخبرته فقال آجرك الله أما إنك لو كنت أعطيتها أخوالك كان أعظم لأجرك. وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن كثير قال أخبرنا سفيان عن محمد بن عجلان عن المقبوري عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال أمرنا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالصدقة فقال رجل يا رسول الله عندي دينار فقال تصدق به على نفسك قال عندي آخر قال تصدق به على ولدك قال عندي آخر قال تصدق به على زوجتك أو قال زوجك قال عندي آخر قال تصدق به على خادمك قال عندي آخر قال أنت أبصر. One thing we do come across here, in the topic of sadaqah, or voluntary charity is discussed, generally the tradition you would have seen in action and by qawl, qawl meaning the verbal utterance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that you always start with the family. So those who are near, dear to you, they have a greater right upon you than those who are not related to you by blood or whatever it may be. So it's important that we start from the family, extensive family. If there's no one, then you go on to other people. But then again, there may be uh, certain circumstances where non-family may require their help and support. So that's why it's very important that what is exception is treated like that, and what is non-exception should be dealt accordingly. And I was speaking to a brother yesterday, and I said I had an incident some years ago where I was leading Salatul Jumu'ah, and there was someone who was a professor of a particular subject, and he was teaching one of the local universities here in Oxfordshire. So he brought his child forward, and it is the Sunnah of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well that you've seen children come to the front row, standing in front row, no problem, an exception as such. And you would find that, but one is exception, one is a norm. So I requested that brother kindly, if you could please go back. But he didn't seem to listen, and he insisted on his point. Then I had to request other brothers to kindly escort him back. And then obviously he said certain statements openly which weren't of a good nature. But for myself at that time, I had to observe silence because it was a public gathering, Salatul Jumu'ah. We're about to start Salah. So obviously, your tensions can raise very, very quickly. But he came back to me after 6 months and asked forgiveness. And I said to him, look, what you done wasn't wrong, but yet it was a sunnah, but yet it was an exception. If an exception is made the norm, i.e., a regular sunnah, that can then contextually create doubts and issues within a community because certain communities will logically have the ability to accept certain things. Even some blunt truths may not always be the best option in terms of advice and support. You might need to explain or go around. They say you hold your ears, but then you hold your ears the other way, because sometimes you might need to do that with some people, but it's needed. That's how they understand, unfortunately, because their acceptability and their perception has been trained, or they've been brought up in a certain way, and the community may be engineered in a certain way. Therefore, I said to this brother that it was a norm. So the only reason why I requested you is I didn't want people thinking that this is a norm. That sunnah is a sunnah, but it's an exception. But it's not something that should be promoted openly so that it becomes a norm. So this is some of the due diligence that sometimes Imam do need to take. Perhaps other Imam may disagree with me on that point, but I took that decision because it's important to ensure that we contextualize and understand the application of each hadith. Sometimes it's not possible, and sometimes it's difficult. وقال حدثنا محمد بن كثير قال حدثنا سفيان قال حدثنا أبو إسحاق عن وهب بن جابر الخيواني عن عبد الله بن عمر قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كفى بالمرء إثما أن يضيع من يقود. وبقال حدثنا أحمد بن صالح ويعقوب بن كعب وهذا حديثه قال حدثنا ابن وهب قال أخبرني يونس عن الزهري عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم سره أن يبسط عليه في رزقه وينسى في أثره فليصل رحمه. Yubsat in Arabic means to spread or extend. So my son's name is Muhammad Basit. So I had a question from my teachers that we've heard of Abdul Basit. What's Muhammad Basit? Where did you get this from? So I thought about it a bit, and subhanAllah, this was from Allah. You see, when Allah puts things in your mind, it happens. So I said, Abdul Basit. It is the name of an Abd who is the servant of Basit. Basit, of course, Allah has different names, different qualities. But I said I wanted something more exclusive. So I put in Muhammad Basit. Why? Because the name Muhammad means that being whose name is constantly praised. And it was exclusive for our Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's what Muhammad means. So I said I wanted my son to have a name which had a greater emphasis from the perspective of equality. So hence, Muhammad, such a person whose name is constantly praised everywhere by the angels and whoever it may be, is the son of the Rabb, who is forever praised. So I sort of explained it in that way to some of my shuyukh, and it kind of hit home that, oh, right, okay, quite unique. But this is something that initially, when we thought about the name, it didn't come home. But when I got this question, I was forced into thinking that's a good question because Abdul Basit, the famous Qari Abdul Basit, and is well known in the society. But I've chosen Muhammad Basit. I mean, yes, that is a bit odd. I've not heard it in my life before, and I've kept my son that name. But I needed to give a reasoning, so I thought about it, and Subhanallah, Allah gave me this inclination that yes, it's a specific waf. So it's not just any abd, but a specific abd. And who is the best of abd? Our Habib Muhammad Arabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وبه قال حدثنا احمد بن صالح ويعقوب بن قعب وهذا حديث قال حدثنا ابن وهب قال اخبرني يونس عن الزهري عن انس قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من سره ان يبسط عليه في رزقه وينسأ في اثاره فليصل رحمه. وبه قال حدثنا مسدد وابو بكر بن ابي شيبه قال حدث سفيان عن الزهري عن ابي سلمة عن عبد الرحمن بن عوف قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول قال الله تعالى انا الرحمن وهي الرحم شققت لها اسما من اسمي من وصلها وصلته ومن قطعها بتته. وقال حدثنا محمد بن المتوكل العسقلاني قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق قال أخبرنا معمر عن الزهري قال حدثني أبو سلمة عن أن الرداد الليثي أخبره عن عبد الرحمن بن عوف أنه سمع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بمعنى قال حدثنا مسدد قال حدث سفيان عن الزهري عن محمد بن جبير بن مطعم عن أبيه يبلغ به النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يدخل الجنة قاطع. So again, very important person who cuts kinship. This is very key. Cuts off. So it doesn't necessarily mean someone who's literally done it, but it could be any kind of action, قولا وفعلا, by word or by action in any way, direct or indirect, which on a conclusive note has led to cutting off kinship. There we go. Sometimes when we talk about the topic of talaq, you get talaq with talaq sarih, and you get talaq which is kinaya, or which is not clear, and that causes the scholars great problems because in the four schools of thought, some are more flexible than others when it comes to the concept of talaq. Like in the Hanafi school, 1 means 1, 2 means 2, 3 means 3. But whereas in the school of Imam Shafi'i, there's a lot more flexibility in what means what and what means how. But one issue which causes a lot of problem is that talaq which is given that doesn't, on the surface, sarahatan, meaning in clear terms, show that, yes, I have divorced you. But it's like, get lost, for example. I don't want you anymore. But does that necessarily mean that the husband has divorced? Or is he looking for separation? Or is he just something else? So these are the sort of situations where the intellect of the fuqaha come in and looking at that case study, looking at the context, looking at the body language and various factors, do the qadis or the ulama or an Islamic court or a mufti will come to a decision. So it's not as easy as ABC. So sometimes you get those situations. That's why it's so important that any situation, we don't take it head on. We give it a moment of thought, time to process, reflect the different angles before we come up with a conclusion. And this is why up until now as well, I'm not that I'm using it as an excuse, but I still have remaining questions for Sunan Abu Dawud. So therefore, some of you are still waiting for those questions. Not an excuse, but again, there's a thought process to certain questions. So some questions I might answer good few weeks later, but there's various tangents of how it has to be answered, how it has to be presented, and so on and so forth. So sometimes what is not, and what was may not be. I mean, I don't know if that sounds right, but sometimes what you do see on the surface, there's a greater level of thought and presentation behind it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from breaking kinship. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken an oath If you look in our society, the union of a husband and wife, they become father and mother. They become a husband, well, husband and wife, yeah. They become grandparents. They become great grandparents just from the institution of a husband and wife. A community is established within a home, then within four homes, and then that becomes sometimes a village. And subhanAllah, so the importance of family unity. Sometimes you're not able to preserve the family unity in its entirety to that level, but it doesn't mean cut off. So in that instance, I've advised a few people that at least whenever you see those members or those specific people, just say salam. And that's it. You don't have to talk further, you don't have to say anything further, but don't cut off completely. Yes, you might need to distance yourselves. You might need to meet each other more rather than more often with a greater period, but don't break family ties and so on and so forth, because these are very, very important parts of our society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then just think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us everything without hisab, without question, without recompense, without any right. I gave the ability to have chicken tikka today. Right. Where's your shukr? Where's your gratefulness? You didn't do that. You haven't thanked me today. Right, that's it. Tomorrow, I'm going to cut off your dinner. Does Allah do that? No. Weeks on end, months on end, Allah is giving. Allah is giving. That's why al-yawm amalun wala hisab. Ghadan hisabun wala amal. Today there is just amal, there is no account. But tomorrow, when we face Allah, at the time when it will matter most, that's when He will take account, because He's giving us time, like He gave Shaitan time. And tomorrow there will be no amal, it will just be hisab. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from being, from entering a period of ghafla, being unaware of what's happening around us, and be conscious of our rights and our responsibilities to Allah, firstly, and then secondly, our kith and kin folk, family, friends, and whoever it may be. Amin ya Rab. وبقال حدثنا ابن كثير قال اخبرنا سفيان عن الأعمش والحسن بن عمرو وفطر عن مجاهد عن عبد الله بن عمرو قال سفيان ولم يرفعه سليمان الى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم رفعه فطر والحسن قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس الواصل بالمكافي ولكن الواصل الذي اذا قطعت رحمه وصلها. Subhanallah. Easy to do good with good, but to give good in answer to evil, that takes some strength of character. And it's upon those trials and difficulties that Allah will give you more ajr. When you look at the context of tajweed and qira'ah, we talk about Quranic recitation. If you consider those who are reverts or converts, however you want to understand that, or people whose first language is not Arabic, they've got to acclimatize to the demands of Arabic first, and then they've got to train themselves to read. That's not easy. And that's the reason why in some ahadith you find the context of that person who has had great difficulty in acclimatizing to the recitation of the Quran. He errs in it, he still tries, he or her, they will receive twofold reward in comparison to that person who can read it without difficulty, as a means and form of encouragement that they persist and they carry on with their studies with relation to the tilawah of the Quran or whatever it may be. Babul fi shuhi. Babul fi shuhi, regarding greed. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with qana'ah, with satisfaction and contentment, and remove the ailment or the illness of greed. That person who has greed, it leads on from one point to another. But if you're satisfied, you're content, loss of wealth, loss of family, yes, these things are tests. They will affect man and woman. But if you have full conviction and full satisfaction that, Ya Allah, whatever you have given, it is for you that you take. It is for you that we have this. So if you have taken, it is from you. If you have given, It is from you, Ya Allah. You know, and it's on that basis where we should have this Imani approach that whatever wealth, if we're experiencing difficulty in wealth, Ya Allah, even to the point that I have nothing to be accounted for worldly wise in terms of wealth. But Ya Allah, whatever I'm earning, you're still giving me something to eat, something to drink, somewhere to sleep. When I look at my other Muslim brothers and sisters around the world, subhanallah, I mean, sometimes makes one cry really when you look at Allah Akbar, other brothers and sisters and what they're going through, and it really hits home. On Eid al-Adha, I had this situation. I don't know if I've mentioned it on previous Sunan Abu Dawud Dars. On the day of Eid al-Adha, as I had finished, where I'm currently leading in Oxfordshire, is an area called Bicester, and very popular for Bicester Village, a shopping centre. But I had two people who came in front of me, and it was just asking for du'as, but it was so heart-wrenching that if I had cried the whole day, I felt my crying would have done justice. I had one brother and sister who came. They said, uh, "Sheikh, could you please do du'a for our child?" And I looked at the child, and visibly, obviously, there was something not quite right. And I spoke about my son because my youngest son recently got diagnosed with autism. Um, so I mentioned that as some level of comfort, but it didn't compare with what I was to hear next. That brother said that my mother, she has the child in front of her. She's holding, it's almost as if, some of the Sahabis or Sahabiyat come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you read history, how they would come and present their needs and ask for dua in the very same way people do today with the pious, with the imam, those people who they've got connection with. And she asked as well that, Imam Sahib, if you could please do dua. And I asked what was the case, and they said that my son had a brain disease, terminal brain disease. He's barely two, but he's brain disease. I could see-through pipes coming from his nose. I'm thinking, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. I've just led Eid. I've just spoken about history. I've had a rush of people come out. The first thing on their mind was the barbecue outside, which is the first time there's been a barbecue in 15, 16 years I've ever heard of. But then I engaged with helping some of the brothers there, and I was speaking to some young brothers, um, speaking to them. And before I knew it, I came out ready to have barbecue, but I had this situation in front of me. And subhanAllah, it didn't take 2 or 3 minutes, but that sister started crying, and my heart just dropped. I'm thinking, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. I know what difficulties I'm going through, which I probably shared with those who are near and dear to me, but Ya Allah, first child, a son, brain disease, that as well, terminal. And she knows this part of me is just but a moment's truth. And that moment's truth could disperse any minute, Ya Allah. And that sister was crying, and I just I just bowed my head, thinking that what do we have to be ungrateful for? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ? Which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? Within 15 minutes, again, I had another brother because I was sitting on the bench waiting for the barbecue. And it was such that I didn't get a chance to have every option of the barbecue. Other brothers then brought stuff to me, but there were so many people who came to meet me, and I just couldn't say no. But when you got these situations, I mean, Imani situation is different. Brother said to me, an Iraqi brother, he said, a few months ago, I lost my brother. I said, Subhanallah, may Allah give him Jannatul Firdaus, and naturally du'as come up. But then he said, Imam Sahib, I want you to watch this video, 4 minute. I said, okay. I said, is there any specific reason? So he said, I have daughters, two daughters. My brother, who is gone, he had one daughter. Um, three kids who were under the age of 10, but there was something specific about that 4-year-old Fatima. There was something specific about the 4-year-old Fatima. So they're based in Iraq. She was speaking in Arabic. And he said to me that the local imam, because his younger brother who had passed away, he was so well to do with the masjid and he was such a prompt and such a consistent khadim of the masjid in terms of helping out, giving the support, facilitating. Wherever there was a need, he would always be there. The imam said, I know your brother more than you. And he said, I couldn't argue with that. The imam, someone saying that they know your blood relative more than you, that in itself is something. But he said that I know more than you. But what really, I suppose, changed the day completely is when he showed this 4-minute video, this beautiful Fatima, 4 years old, and her uncle, i.e., the brother who's sitting next to me, says in Arabic, Ya Fatima, what would you like to say to your father on the day of Eid? Can you imagine tender, young, innocent Fatima, 4 years old? What would she say? And I was just my attention was glued to the screen, and was just I was so haste. I was in such a haste to listen what was coming next. The curiosity was building, and Fatima says, "Ya abati, ya abati, oh my father." And she was saying in Arabic, wherever you are, wherever you may be, your daughter or your Fatima sends you Eid Mubarak. Yo, Fatima sends you Eid Mubarak. Oh, Father, I remember you dearly on this day. You, your Fatima remembers you on this day. She misses you. She waits for you, but she prays for you. Wherever you are, Abati, wherever you are, my father, I wish you well and I will do dua for you. When I heard those words, my heart just dropped. I'm thinking we're so engaged in our worldly life that we're so unaware of what's happening around us. Brothers and sisters who are in such situations. I just had a meeting 2 days ago with a brother who contacted me through Facebook. He said, Sheikh, I've come across your videos on Facebook and I need your help. And obviously online, many things have to be verified. So we set up a meeting and he said, my wife, I'm doing sadaqah jariyah for my wife. I've contacted a local charity to set up a page, and we're raising £12,000 as sadaqah jariyah for my wife, but we've done about 10.5K something. I need your help and support. So obviously I said to him, okay, we'll set up a Zoom meeting, we'll discuss that, we'll go through that. One point which we I had to explain a bit is that I just needed verification to say that I know him. I've met him. I know someone who knows him really well. So there were lots of points that showed me clearly that he knows people who I knew. He's based in Birmingham in the UK, and his wife, marriage of 3 years, son 3 years. He showed me his son. She's diagnosed terminally with a brain cancer. Wife's mother diagnosed with terminally ill bowel cancer. He said, my mother, who is mentally ill, she is dependent upon others. He said, Sheikh, it's a matter of months or a year to two. If I lose these females, it'll just be me and my son. What am I going to do? Subhanallah. And I thought, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And I had to, keeping in mind the sensitivity of that situation, I couldn't say that because what he wanted me was to help him on social media, make a video and promote his charity, but Sadqa Jariyah, which he was trying to make a masjid for his wife in another country. And a part of that was to establish water pumps in different areas of Asia. But again, as I said, due diligence is required, and that is a process. And I said, I'm not doubting your effort. I said that's praiseworthy, that's noble. But I said, but the area of the world we live in, there's a verification process, and we just have to undergo that. And the very same way when I perform nikahs as well, such stringent standards. But subhanallah, yeah, even till now, I mean, I think since it's probably been more than a couple of weeks. But that video of that 4-year-old Fatima, I don't forget that. I really don't forget that, and it makes me do more sabr with my daughters, both who are teenagers currently. And when I think that I've got someone in my wedlock who's someone's daughter, I have daughters now. I will be questioned. There's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that everyone is responsible for their flock and everyone will be questioned in relation to their responsibilities. So your wife is your responsibility, your children are your responsibility. You'll be questioned about that, how you underwent your responsibilities. What answer will you give? She was someone's daughter, right? You could have favored your daughter in situations that suited your context, but what about your treatment with someone else's daughter? Did you not think about your treatment when you done it to someone's daughter? Yes, she was your wife, but she was someone's daughter. The adala, the justice, the scale of account. Where did it go then? So such questions really scares one person, and it the hairs on end. It stands up. I'm going to stand one day in front of Allah. I'm going to give an account. How I'm going to answer my Rabb? How am I going to answer? And it was that fear and that sadness and that concern that sometimes made some of the Anbiya and some of the pious people go unconscious because it was that thought. Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an, he would sometimes be sitting on the pulpit addressing, and sometimes he would be crying, you know. Even Rasul, our Habib, crying, ma qaddamtu wa ma akhartu, your previous sins and whatever is to come has been forgiven. He said, why should I not cry? Why should I not be a shakir, a hamid of my Rabb? My Rabb has given me so much. Why should I be grateful? Why should I be thankful? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ Ya Allah, Ya Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength to realize and appreciate life. Sometimes I had some of my shuyukh who would give us some really heartfelt gestures which hits in on the context of the hadith. So it's not just about just reading the hadith, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, fantastic, brilliant. But there's also sometimes we need to hear these. And that Eid days was an Eid day night like none other that I experienced before. But I was, at the end of it, I was questioning that what was the reason maybe my Rabb made me hear these situations. Yes, I was in the capacity of an imam, but it was just another opportunity to be mindful that number one, I'm going to leave this world one day. Number two, that what Allah has given you, adopt shukr. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. That if you do shukr, Allah will increase you. Very important. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us shakir, make us hamid of our Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala. باب في الشح regarding greed. وقال حدثنا حفص بن عمر قال حدثنا شعبة عن عمرو بن مرة عن عبد الله بن الحارث عن أبي كثير عن عبد الله بن عمرو قال خطب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال إياكم والشح فإنما هلك من كان قبلكم بالشح أمرهم بالبخل فبخلوا وأمرهم بالقطيعة فقطعوا وأمرهم بالفجور ففجروا. وبي قال حدثنا مسلم قال حدثنا إسماعيل قال أخبرنا أيوب قال حدثنا عبد الله بن أبي مليكة قال حدثتني أسماء بنت أبي بكر قالت قلت يا رسول الله ما لي شيء إلا ما أدخل علي الزبير بيته أفأعطي منه قال أعطي ولا توكي فيوكى عليك. وبي قال حدثنا مسلم قال حدثنا إسماعيل قال أخبرنا أيوب عن عبد الله بن أبي مليكة عن عائشة أنها ذكرت عدة من مساكين قال أبو داود وقال غيره أو عدة من صدقة فقال لها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أعطي ولا تحصي فيحصى عليك. End of Kitab al-Zakah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength to fully understand whatever we did or to whatever capacity we were able to from those ahadith that we just went past in Kitab al-Zakah, inshallah, which we will revisit in Mukhtasar al-Quduri, inshallah, bidnillah, whenever we are when we will. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. If you want to further your Islamic studies, click on the link below in the description. I'll see you on the other side.